Organizations are absolutely everywhere. They shape pretty much every part of our lives. But have you ever stopped to think about how we actually understand them? Are they rational machines that we can engineer for perfection? Or are they more like complex cultures that we have to interpret? Or maybe, are they just arenas for power struggles? Today, we're going to trace the fascinating evolution of organization theory to explore these very questions.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the intellectual foundations, the real bedrock of it all. Then we're going to equip ourselves with three very distinct lenses for analysis: the modern, the symbolic, and the postmodern. By the end of this, you'll have a complete toolkit for seeing organizations in ways you might never have considered before.
And this is really the fundamental question, isn't it? And as we're about to see, there is no single easy answer. Instead, what the history of organization theory gives us is a series of powerful, often competing lenses. Each one reveals a completely different facet of what goes on inside an organization.
Right. Before we can really dig into the major perspectives that dominate the field today, we've got to go back and look at their intellectual bedrock. These are the core concepts from political economy and sociology that really paved the way for organization theory to become its own formal discipline. This timeline here is basically a roadmap for the whole discussion. You can see a really clear progression. We start in this prehistory with the foundational thinkers, then move into the rise of the modern and symbolic views, and it all culminates in the critical turn of postmodernism. What's so interesting is that each era builds on, and crucially, often reacts against the one that came right before it. Our story really begins with Adam Smith. His observation in a simple pin factory was nothing short of revolutionary. He saw that 10 specialized workers could produce an incredible 48,000 pins a day. That's a feat that would be utterly impossible for any one of them alone. And with that single insight, the idea of the division of labor, and with it the relentless pursuit of efficiency, was cemented as a core principle of organizing. Then we have Max Weber. Now, when we hear bureaucracy today, we immediately think of frustrating red tape, right? But for Weber, it was a profoundly rationalizing force. His ideal bureaucracy was actually designed to get rid of things like nepotism and charisma and replace them with a system of authority based purely on clear rules, defined roles, and technical merit.
And completing this foundational trio is Frederick Taylor, often called the father of scientific management. Taylor's proposition was pretty radical. Management isn't an art, it's a science. He truly believed that by finding the one best way to do any task, you could create a system so efficient that it would benefit both the owners and the workers, and, in theory, eliminate industrial conflict altogether. So, with those foundations in place, we can now dive into our first formal perspective. The modernist lens takes the ideas of Smith, Weber, and Taylor and builds on them, seeing the organization as a kind of rational system, almost like a machine whose parts can be designed and calibrated for maximum performance. And here we see a really crucial distinction that Weber made. On one hand, you have formal rationality. You can think of this as the how. It's all about the cold calculations, the measurements, anything to achieve technical efficiency. But on the other hand, there's substantive rationality, and that's the why. This forces us to question the values and the ultimate purpose that all this efficiency is supposed to be serving. But Weber was also the first to give us a profound warning. He feared that an obsession with just formal rationality, completely divorced from substantive values, could trap us all in an iron cage of our own making, a system that's perfectly efficient, but reduces people to nothing more than cogs in a giant machine. Now, this critique of a universal, one best way led directly to something called contingency theory. Its main idea is actually quite simple. The best way to organize is always contingent on the context. The logic is basically if-then. For instance, if the environment you're in is highly volatile, then a flexible, decentralized structure is going to outperform a rigid hierarchy every time. Okay, now we're going to make a really significant pivot. What if organizations aren't machines to be engineered at all? What if they're actually cultures to be interpreted? This question is right at the heart of the symbolic perspective, which shifts our focus away from efficiency and structure and into the world of shared meanings, rituals, and symbols. So symbolic theorists ask this radical question. What if organizational reality isn't an objective, external thing, but is instead something that's socially constructed by its members? The argument is that we collectively create our reality through shared language, through stories, through beliefs. In essence, the organization exists primarily because all of its members agree to act as if it does. The anthropologist Clifford Geertz gives us the perfect metaphor for this. He said that, quote, "Man is an animal suspended in webs of significance he himself has spun.
And for Gertz, culture is those webs. So to analyze an organization from this point of view is really an act of interpretation. It's about understanding that unique web of meaning that its members have created for themselves.
Berger and Luckman broke down exactly how this process unfolds. First, we externalize an idea. We give it a form through language or symbols. Then, as it gets shared, it becomes objectified, making it seem like a concrete, external fact. And finally, we internalize this so-called fact, accepting the constructed reality as just the natural order of things.
Karl Weick takes this idea even further with his theory of enactment. He famously argued that managers don't just react to an environment that's already there, they actually create it through their actions and how they make sense of them afterwards. We act, and then we interpret what we just did, literally enacting the very reality we then respond to. The environment isn't something we perceive, it's something we make.
And that brings us to our final lens, the postmodern, which is the most critical turn of all. It goes beyond just offering an alternative view. Instead, it tries to deconstruct the core assumptions of both modernism and symbolism. It urges us to question the very nature of truth, reality, and especially power within organizations. Okay, so the modernist view of language, which is really the common sense view for most of us, is that language is like a neutral mirror. Words are just labels we use to describe a reality that's already out there. The word manager simply reflects the person who is in fact the manager.
Postmodernism comes along and just shatters that mirror. It argues that language is not a mirror, it's a hammer. It doesn't just reflect reality, it actively forges it. And if language creates reality, well then it can never be neutral. It is always inherently an instrument of power.
This leads us right to Michel Foucault's pivotal concept of power/knowledge. He argued that they aren't separate things at all. They're two sides of the same coin. Knowledge is a form of power, and power constantly produces new kinds of knowledge. The ability to define what's considered true, or sane, or efficient management, that's the most subtle and effective form of control there is.
So the main analytical tool for this perspective comes from Jacques Derrida, and it's called deconstruction. This is a way of reading texts, and that could be anything from a mission statement to a management textbook, and basically taking them apart. You look for the internal contradictions, the hidden hierarchies, and most importantly, the voices and meanings that have been systematically excluded. So at the end of all this, we're left with three profoundly different perspectives. And the challenge isn't to decide which one is correct. It's to appreciate them as a versatile analytical toolkit. A skilled theorist knows that each lens, modern, symbolic, and postmodern, can reveal truths that are completely invisible to the others.
This table really summarizes the crucial differences so well. The modernist's goal, prediction and control of a reality it sees as singular and pre-existing. The symbolist's goal, that's about understanding and appreciating the socially constructed meanings inside an organization, and the postmodernist's goal is liberation, which it tries to achieve by deconstructing the very power relations that produce our sense of reality.
And this leaves us with a final practical question for you. Think about an organization you know well. Which of these lenses offers you the most insight? Do you see it primarily as a rational machine, a complex culture, or an arena of power struggles? The most profound understanding, perhaps, comes not from choosing just one, but from learning how to see through all three at once.